welcome to a special edition of Power Play. I'm Vashi Capellos coming to you live this afternoon locally or this evening in other time zones from Calgary on this Friday where Conservatives have descended upon this convention center for their annual convention. Tonight is a big night for Pierre Poilievre.
I think Pierre is going to have very good support from the delegates.
Yes to a united Canada, and yes to a united Conservative Party led by Pierre Poilievre.
We're just hours away from a critical vote that will determine the fate of Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre's leadership. The decision will be in the hands of party members who have come here to cast their choice. Conservative MPs, as you heard, are publicly voicing support, but will it translate into the numbers Poilievre needs? We're going to take you into the room where it's all happening. We'll go one-on-one with Conservative House Leader Andrew Scheer and former Conservative Minister John Baird. Plus, a special edition of our front bench is standing by. Sharon Carr, Sebastian Skamsky, and Kim Wright will all be here with me on set in just a little bit. First, though,
I'm glad to see that Pierre has taken that part of our process very seriously because, as you may recall, after the previous election, I had to bring a petition to try to force pressure on Mr. O'Toole to have a leadership review, and that's what I was asking for. And meanwhile, Pierre not only has the review, but has it at a very early stage.
Let's say yes to affordable groceries, yes to a united Canada, and yes to a united Conservative Party led by Pierre Poilievre, the man who increased our Conservative coalition to 41.5% of the national vote and garnered a historic 8.1 million votes.
Some of what we've been hearing here from various MPs and senators from the Conservative Party who have been addressing delegates really since this convention got underway yesterday afternoon. Tonight, like I said, though, is the big night. Two big things happening. Pierre Poilievre himself will address delegates, and then members will start to cast their ballot in a leadership vote for the leader of the Conservative Party. My colleague Jeremy Charon has been on the ground for the past 2 days, talking to delegates, talking to people who are organizing all of this to try and figure out what may actually happen. He joins me live from just outside the building where this is taking place. Hi, Jeremy. Explain to everyone watching and to myself how this is all going to unfold tonight.
Yeah, I mean, it's all eyes on that vote tonight, right? And what we'll see is the evening ceremonies start around 6:30 Mountain Time. And those ceremonies will conclude with Mr. Poilievre's speech. He'll address the crowd. And it's directly after that the vote will start. There'll be a voting period. Then they're going to have to tally the votes, of course. And then we're expecting a pretty late result. And then we'll know, of course, whether or not Mr. Poilievre will remain leader. Of course, it is widely expected he will. The big question will be what level of support he gets. And again, a reminder to those watching, it's delegates that are voting here. So how this works, you have delegates that have been selected from ridings across the country. They're representing Conservative members in their communities. They will get to vote. And as you've touched on, the pitch from MPs taking the stage through the weekend is that Pierre needs to be the guy. They want him to continue to lead the party. They, have been talking about how proud they were of the result of the last election, increasing their seat count. While, of course, we know they did not form government, and Mr. Poilievre lost his seat, had to run in a by-election to regain it. So a big moment tonight. The speech will be important, of course. I'll be watching to kind of see the kind of tone he looks to strike in that speech, if he's trying to, address the base and motivate the people that are there voting for him or not. Or if he's taking the opportunity to speak to perhaps a wider range of potential voters and try and continue the party's path to grow that tent a little bit and try and have more success in the next election.
I mentioned, Jeremy, that both you and I and everyone from our team have been trying to speak to as many delegates as possible. But I'll offer one quick anecdote because we keep asking, what's the number to every MP we're interviewing, for example. And someone stopped me and said, Vash, you keep asking what the number is. It's going to be 87%. That was his very specific prediction. What has been the sense that you've been able to get from the delegates you're speaking to about, what they're looking for?
Yeah, I mean, we've heard from kind of two camps, right? There's between, in the range of delegates we've spoken to, we've heard from either people that are completely on board with Mr. Poilievre, 100% confident in him. They know how they're going to vote already. They're coming here to support him. And then there are people here that say they want to hear things. We spoke to a woman yesterday who believes, she wants to hear, she was from BC, she's a delegate from BC, and said she wants to hear the party acknowledge that mistakes were made in the last election, that things need to change. So there are people here looking to hear very specific things and willing to listen before making that choice that will, inform their decision on whether or not they believe Mr. Poilievre is the person to move forward. And so I think that's why tonight's speech will matter, because there are people in the room we know who we've spoken to that are going to be paying very close attention to what he says, and it could influence their vote one way or the other. So, almost surprised in a way, Vashi, to hear enough of these delegates that have been willing to openly tell us that they're not sold yet. They're not completely decided. They are willing to make a decision based on what they hear during the convention.
Okay, I'll leave it there. Jeremy, thanks very much for your coverage. Look forward to it throughout the rest of the night. Jeremy Charest here just outside the convention center. And certainly we will have special coverage, I'll mention, of Pierre Poilievre's speech. That'll get underway at 8 o'clock Eastern, or 8 o'clock Mountain, or no, 8 o'clock Eastern, pardon me, I'm mixed up on my time zones. We'll have some pregame show, and then, of course, we'll carry the entire speech live. Joining me now to get the vantage point from caucus and from the party itself is the Conservative House Leader, Andrew Scheer. Hi, Mr. Scheer. It's good to see you again.
Great to see this on the road.
Yeah. A few days ago in Ottawa, today in Calgary. I wanted to start off with some questions about what to anticipate from Mr. Poilievre's speech tonight. And first off, ask you if he will speak to the issue of separatism as the sentiment exists in this province and the news that we've seen of late.
Well, I believe what you're going to hear tonight is both an underlining of the broken promises that Mark Carney has made. We're almost a year into his mandate, and part of this message tonight will be to the general Canadian public who we feel need to understand exactly where Mark Carney has fallen short from getting a deal on U.S. tariffs, on lowering grocery prices and things like that. But I also think I expect you're going to see a very uplifting, hopeful message about what's to come. And part of Conservatives gathering here tonight, we take a great deal of comfort in knowing that we won the debate on the core issues. Everybody was telling us the debate on the carbon tax was over. We won that debate. Everybody was telling us that the debate on flooding our streets with harmful drugs was over. We won that argument. So I think you're going to see an inspirational, forward-looking message about how Conservatives can take that case to the Canadian people, that authentic Conservative policies will improve the quality of life for all Canadians. And as the specific question, look, every time Liberals are in power, we have national unity crises. I'm from Western Canada. I'm from Saskatchewan. I understand why people in Western Canada, particularly Alberta, feel that the federal government in Ottawa does a lot of harm to their province. I mean, even with this MOU on a proposed pipeline perhaps one day coming, there's still conditions in there about a harmful industrial carbon tax. But the message tonight is that the best way to solve those is not to attack those people for feeling upset, but to say how a Conservative government that respects provincial jurisdiction can unite Canada around some core themes. I expect you'll hear that.
The MOU has support from the Conservative Premier of this province, who will address these delegates tomorrow. On the question of separatism, I'll delineate more specifically in my question to you in the way in which the leader and yourself might address it. Because I also understand the sentiment of feeling overlooked, and I wouldn't want to disregard that or castigate those who feel that way. But in my mind, there is a clear difference between expressing that sentiment and deciding to go meet with officials in the Trump administration to fund a movement to break up this country. Does your party denounce that act?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, decisions about Canada should be made by Canadians. I think we can all agree on that, absolutely. And what I would say, it's not just a feeling of being overlooked. Sometimes I talk to people who say, we wish we were just overlooked. It's when Liberals impose harmful policies like the carbon tax, like the No More Pipelines bill, like the shipping ban on Canadian energy, oil and gas off the West Coast. So I think what we're going to speak to, what you're going to hear Conservatives talk about this is, look, I'm a Western Canadian. I don't want to give up on Canada. I fight for this country. I'm proud of our history and our heritage, and I believe that a Conservative government can unite all regions of Canada, including Quebec, by respecting provincial jurisdictions, including Saskatchewan and Alberta, by championing our resource sector and not forcing a harmful industrial carbon tax. I understand why provincial premiers might say, well, it's not quite as bad as what it was under the Trudeau government, but that shouldn't be the bar that we set for ourselves as Canadians. Being better, slightly less bad than Justin Trudeau shouldn't be the measure of success.
But Danielle Smith isn't just saying it's slightly less bad than it was under Justin Trudeau. She's very much endorsing the MOU that she signed. And I'm wondering also, because when you were talking and you were sort of, the way the pitch from your party appears to be that this government is the same as the last government when it comes to those issues around resource development, for example. I have a number of quotes here from delegates that myself and my colleagues spoke to today. Carney is a different animal, so Poilievre will have to change his approach and be more likable because he doesn't need to be so antagonizing. If you want a good government, then you need strong opposition, and opposition needs to work with government, not just criticize. We're in a very difficult situation with the U.S. and need to be working for a solution. There's a lot of things we can do together, and I think we need to cooperate and get things done. It's not fair to characterize Mr. Carney's actions on resource development as exactly the same as Mr. Trudeau's. They quite simply have not been.
Well, the results are the same. The results are the same, and that's the point. Mark Carney wrote a book defining who he is as a human being called Values. In that book, he talked about leaving oil and gas in the ground, leaving our natural resources in the ground, saying that carbon taxes have to be ever higher. I believe that what happened was Liberals realized that Liberal policies were unpopular, so they're pretending to adopt some Conservative policies, but they're not actually going to see it through. So we'll see. We'll see if a pipeline to the Pacific gets built. We'll see if an industrial carbon tax ever gets dropped. We'll see if real barrel reform ever comes in. But right now, what we've seen from the Liberals is a lot of lip service, a lot of change in rhetoric, but not really on results.
But they've removed the oil and gas. For one example, they've removed the oil and gas emissions cap, for example, through this MOU.
If all these other conditions are
but they have provided
articulated.
a path to which the tanker ban could be exempted.
We'll see.
But that's not the same as Trudeau.
But it's not the same outcome. It is the same outcome. To this point, it is the same outcome. We'll see what happens. We'll see. I'm not holding my breath. I don't believe that Mark Carney believes in it. I take him at his word when he wrote that book. When he wrote that book, quoting Karl Marx and talking about his core values and talking about leaving oil and gas in the ground. I believe him. I also believe that Liberals are unburdened by principle, and so they will say whatever it takes to get elected. But we'll see what actually comes and the results part of it. And the intentions, the rhetoric. You can't pay your bills with that. You can't get a job in the oil and gas sector with good intentions or a change of rhetoric. It takes results. And to this point, on the day that we are having this conversation, the rhetoric has changed, but the results haven't.
What do you take from that? That's not my words. Those are the words of delegates who are here. But I want to ask you specifically because, for example, I interviewed Minister McKinnon, your counterpart in the government earlier, who had a series of examples he provided in which he characterized the behavior of your party in government at this time of crisis as anything but collaborative. Your delegates here are asking for more collaboration. Will that be reflected tonight?
Well, first of all, you clearly have some of those sentiments. There's over 2,000 people here.
Yeah, I didn't talk to all of them.
Of quotes.
But I was surprised at how specific they were. That's why I bring it up.
You may recall, I'm sure you do recall that when the Liberals said that they needed Bill C-5, rather than repeal bad Liberal legislation, they said they needed a special law to go around bad Liberal legislation that would get big projects built. We passed that. We allowed that to pass. We said, okay, we'll put up or shut up type of thing. Let's give you this legislation and see what actually comes from it. Mark Carney said we can move he could move at unimaginable speeds. We're almost a year into his term. Not a single new project has gone through the major projects office. So where we think that the Liberal legislation will at least do no further harm, or where we say, okay, well, this is Mark Carney's offer, his solution on something like his response to the bail crisis that Liberals caused, we'll say, okay, we'll let it pass and then see what happens.
But you didn't exactly do that, right? Because those bills, the bail reform bill was introduced in late October. The hate crime bill that I know you have, very specific policy concerns about was introduced in early October. There's evidence in committee of one of your MPs, for example, filibustering and talking about cats and dogs in order to delay the debate around that. There is evidence that on certain instances, your party has used the tools available to it, which I get parties in opposition do, but given the stuff that I'm hearing from your delegate about collaboration, seems to run counter to a message you're trying to sell at the same time.
Well, that evidence is hearsay and is rejected because it's not true.
I saw the cats and dogs comment.
But what we were calling for, and there are 19, now 20 examples of this, where we came to committee and said, look, we're not going to agree on Bill C-9. Liberals want to censor religious speech and text. Let's park that. Let's save our dispute on that to pass the bail reform bill, which we have long been calling for. 19 times the Liberals refused. It took our leader, Pierre Poilievre, writing a formal letter to the Prime Minister specifically outlining that. Finally, last week, after months of delay, Liberal delay, an agreement was reached, and now that bill will proceed. It was the Liberal choice.
But why can't you debate C9 and have your opposition to it and then eventually lead it to go to a vote?
Liberals control the timelines on committee. Liberals, it's a Liberal chair. So it was a Liberal choice to have a long and drawn-out debate on something that is very divisive for Canadians instead of actually tackling bail reform. That was a Liberal choice. That was not a Conservative choice.
But why did you have to delay the debate on the other one?
Why did the Liberals have to keep the discussion on C9?
With all due respect, I went hard at Minister McKinnon.
So we're supposed to let a bill pass that we don't agree with when there's another way?
Not pass, put to a vote.
Well, we specifically said let's park that and bring the bail reform bill to a vote. It was a Liberal choice to reject that offer until finally last week. So these are all Liberal choices. Liberals control the committees. They have Liberal chairs. It was completely within their power. If they wanted that bill passed more quickly, they had every tool at their disposal to do that.
So you're saying that you're not employing as a party on any instances in the past number of months the tools that you have available to you to prolong things getting to a stage where the government can say, hey, look what we've done. We passed this thing. Really? I don't think that's true.
Well, look at the evidence. On key areas where we have said, Mark Carney says he needs this to, get big things built, to help fight back against U.S. tariffs, whether it's a trade deal or things like that. We said, okay, we will allow those things to pass.
Well,
and often, C5, C18 is coming up next week. C13. These are two Liberal Trudeau-era trade deals that are finally coming to the House. Those are areas that we have said absolutely we can let pass. We can agree to certain timelines. C2, remember C2, this was the government's response to everything from border security to the fentanyl crisis. They inserted a lot of things in there that were government overreach. We worked collaboratively with the government to hive off the sections that we agreed and gave that speedy passage through the House because there was some common ground there. So this characterization that when there's something that divides Canadians that Conservatives have long established opposition to, yes, we are not going to cooperate in the passage of those bills, but it's the Liberals themselves that have chosen to focus on those things that are more divisive rather than find that common ground.
Just one final question for you, Mr. If your characterization of all of that were true, would all the delegates here not be totally convinced of that?
Well, it is
Why
true.
are they asking for more collaboration, a different tone from Mr. Poilievre? In these instances, and I take your point that it's not everybody, but in these instances...
I would be happy to, maybe I could talk to the schedulers here and have a whole session tomorrow on the last few months in Parliament and go bring some copies of Hansard's and journals.
No, I mean just more largely. I don't mean like we're talking the specifics, but I'm saying like if that were the impression that you were leaving with your own party members, would they not be raising these issues?
I can tell you, I've had the opportunity to speak to hundreds of delegates here today. That is, I don't believe I believe the sentiments that you will find, and you will see it reflected in the vote tonight, is a strong endorsement of our leaders' approach, a strong endorsement of how Conservatives are absolutely able to establish principled opposition to things that we believe will harm Canadians, as we did for the last 10 years, watching this terrible, slow-moving train wreck of the last 10 years of Liberal government, imposing a carbon tax, chasing away billions of dollars of investment, inflationary deficits that robbed workers of their paychecks. Just as we were putting forward principled opposition then, we will do so today where it is warranted and where we believe we can find some common ground, or where we believe that at least the Liberal legislation will not do any further harm. We'll say, okay, well, we'll respect the mandate that Canadians gave the Liberals and see what the results actually are. Results are far more important than intentions.
I got to leave it on that note. Mr. Scheer, a pleasure as always. Thank you for making the time. Andrew Scheer is the Conservatives House Leader. We've got a whole lot more of this special edition of Power Play live from Calgary after a short commercial break. Stay right there.
I think Poilievre's solid. People got the wrong impression on Poilievre. He was up against a different prime minister for 10 years who was doing a horribly bad job. And all Poilievre could do was stand up and criticize constantly. So everybody thinks that's all he can do, because for 10 years, that's all he could do. So with Carney, he's a different animal altogether. So Poilievre will change his approach, and I think you'll see a much more likable individual.
It was a success, but it wasn't a win. Still, when you go behind that curtain, it's still your private franchise, and you decide as you will at that time. So that's why I came to the convention to get a sense of what's happening.
So your mind isn't made up yet?
Not totally yet.
Welcome back to Power Play, live from Calgary, where the Conservative Convention is taking place. We're a few hours away from the address from the leader of the party, Pierre Poilievre, two delegates who have assembled here. You heard earlier from the Conservative House Leader Andrew Scheer. The Liberals and other political parties at political conventions usually send delegates to observe what's going on. In this case, that is Liberal MP from a riding in Calgary, Cory Hogan. Mr. Hogan is also the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Natural Resources. We spoke to him a little earlier.
Hi, Mr. Hogan. Nice to see you.
Nice to be here.
In person. Thanks very much for
absolutely.
making the time. I read with interest your statement in advance of the convention where you highlighted some of the issues like conversion therapy and abortion that will be debated. And I have to say, I read it and I got very like Trudeau era vibes, where there was a real effort to characterize the party as such, to kind of scare off voters. Why did you feel you need to do that?
Yeah, fair ball. I think that when we have such big things going on, when we're talking about our relationship with the United States, when we're talking about all of these macro issues, sometimes we forget the general thrust of politics. And so much of governing is dealing with those issues as they come up. And we do need to look at the parties as they're pulling forward these policies and understanding where's the heart of this party right now, where's the soul, and also what's the leader going to say about it, because parties are going to do what parties are going to do, but leaders get to react to it too. So,
and I think it's fair game to, and we as journalists should be scrutinizing the types of policies that put forward. We have in pretty much every instance. But I also say, like I've covered Aaron O'Toole's leadership, Andrew Scheer's leadership, they were far less definitive on how they would govern in those instances around those issues than Mr. Poilievre has. To be fair to him, he's not up there talking about abortion, talking about conversion therapy. He's very much focused on the exact same issue set that your government is talking about. So is your criticism in this instance fair?
I think so, because I think ultimately parties are more than one person, and we all know that there is a leadership review that's happening right now. I strongly suspect Pierre Poilievre will be the leader after tonight. I think he's going to win by a huge majority. But if he's not, there is an organization there, and that organization is still responsible to Canadians. It's still responsive to Canadians, and we need to know where the Conservative Party is at this point.
But almost more than 8 million people voted for the Conservatives in the last election. The divide between your party and them is just over 400,000 people.
Pretty close.
Is it at this time where your party constantly talks about the crisis we face, national unity being a central issue, is this the time to try and, label them as kind of, outside the realm of important stuff and scare people off from voting for them? Like, isn't that politics of division at a time when your party is lecturing the rest of us not to do so?
Look, I think that we have a House of Commons that's not operating very well right now. There's a lot of obstruction. There are speeches in the House about working together, but we're having difficulty with committees. We're having difficulty with bills. A lot of this is driven by fundamentally having different value sets. And I think we do need to call that out. Is that the major issue of the day? I'm not sure. I think that our relationship with the world probably is. What we want Canada to do on the world stage probably is. But there has to be a time to talk about domestic politics too. And I think it is fair to say that the Conservative Party has been flirting with some strange domestic politics over the years.
So I want to pick up on kind of those bigger issues, and in particular the criticism that I've heard as I've heard different speakers speak here of your government. I'm sure you're familiar with it. It's sort of a theme that's emerged from recent leader comments as well, that the rhetoric is there, but there's a gap between rhetoric and reality, in particular on resource development. And that's obviously the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Natural Resources. So this week I heard the Prime Minister in the House of Commons say explicitly the MOU signed with Alberta will build a pipeline to BC's coast. Do you agree with that statement?
I absolutely agree with that. I think that we also saw really productive conversations between Premier Zeby and Smith, and I think that's kind of the pith of it. We want to bring people together to get those big things built. And look, over the last, not even 12 months since the election, we've got 12 new trade and security agreements with people, 180,000 new jobs. Wages have grown faster than inflation every month that Mark Carney's been Prime Minister. I think there's a lot that you can point to as really concrete, tangible outcomes from this government. And I understand opposition's got to oppose. They got to identify the things where they're going to dig in. But I think the record speaks for itself, and we're just getting started.
In this case, I think what informs the opposition to the idea that pipeline actually will get built is the record of your party prior to the Prime Minister assuming office. And to be fair, some of the comments from some of your colleagues even since assuming office. So I'll point to an example I'm very familiar with. Minister Robertson, who I had on our show, who was dead set as mayor of Vancouver against the construction of TMX. I asked him no less than 4 times if he agreed with just the wording of the MOU around an exemption to the tanker ban, and he could not say unequivocally that he would. Do you understand how that provides, members of the opposition and those who vote for them with a lot of doubt about your government's ability to actually see this stuff materialize?
Well, I'd have to go back and look at it. I didn't see the Gregor interview. I should, sounds like it. But the reality is there are going to be diverse views in any caucus, but the lead comes from the Prime Minister, and the Prime Minister's been pretty clear, as you noted, in the House of Commons even this week. A pipeline to the West Coast is good for Canada. Right now, we sell 90% of our oil to the United States. I think we'd like to change that. I think just national security demands that be changed. And so, look, we've got space for a deal here. We've got an opportunity to get big things built, and I think we're going to use that opportunity.
But again, it's not like I'm asking about somebody who was in office 3 years ago in the backbenches, right? This is a prominent member of the federal cabinet who sits around the table who literally, it was not even, I didn't even say, could the pipeline get built? I just asked about the tanker ban. And we know that a number of your colleagues who represent ridings in British Columbia also are voicing concern about the prospect of the tanker ban being lifted. How can Canadians have confidence that that kind of pushback, which dominated during the Trudeau era, will not materialize through whatever you guys do?
Well, fair ball, but there's a diverse view in caucus and there's diverse views in the House of Commons. And the House of Commons is solidly in support of building such a pipeline. And I think that matters a great deal. Canadians are also very supportive of building a pipeline. And I think we've got to acknowledge that the last time a major pipeline to Tidewater was built was by a Liberal government. It was the Trans Mountain expansion. It's what gave us that 10% to foreign markets instead of being entirely tied into the U.S. And it's not as though that was a universally supported thing within the Trudeau government, but it got done. And it got done because the Prime Minister of the day supported it. The Prime Minister of the day today supports a pipeline to the West Coast.
You're totally right to point out TMX and the federal government's ownership. There was another pipeline, though, Northern Gateway, right, which would have been more similar to whatever is being pitched right now, that faced a different kind of opposition because of where it would be located and the potential involvement of coastal First Nations. That's the opposition that's being voiced today as well. It was the Trudeau government that decided not to appeal the court decision that effectively killed Northern Gateway. Again, you see where I'm getting, it's like, I know what you're saying, I know your record on it, but it's not the same for so many people who sit in your caucus. And I think that does create doubt.
Well, I don't know about so many. I think that if we were going to do a whip count on it, you'd see an overwhelming majority in support of the MOU. But here's what it gets down to. The Prime Minister acknowledges the value of this. Premier Eby has said he could support a pipeline depending on the route, maybe not to a northern route. Premier Smith has said she's willing to find Indigenous economic reconciliation as a major component of it, social justice as a major component of it, carbon action as a major component of it. I think we're in build mode in this country, and I think the premiers are looking to get things done, not looking at ways that they can block each other.
There's some interesting recent analysis from the Parliamentary Budget Officer, whom I know your party is not the biggest fan of at this moment, but it's just around some measures in the budget that speak to what you're talking about, right? This idea that your party keeps, and your government keeps telling Canadians, we're building bigger than ever. He analyzed the amount of investment in the budget that was supposed to lead to $1 trillion of additional investment over 5 years, and found that just 15% of it is new. So I'll again kind of respectfully challenge the idea, I think, that I'm hearing in here, which is, rhetoric doesn't necessarily match reality. So we're doing all this new stuff that will create this new development. The Parliamentary Budget Officer says 85% of it was already in the works.
Well, 15% is a pretty huge year-over-year change, first, I gotta say. But second of all, a lot of the tools we're using are tools that unlock private investment. We've got our super deduction, for example, that will allow investment in capital in Canada to be way more competitive than investment in other jurisdictions. We've looked at ways that we can get R&D credits flowing more quickly and encouraging that kind of investment in the country. And of course, we want to have multiplier effects where we're also directing with Build Canada that these things are coming from Canadian companies. So look, A, 15%, pretty big. B, it's also designed to unlock.
But does 15% match the way in which the Prime Minister is telling Canadians, many of whom are here, look at all this stuff that's going to happen? That's not, a lot of it, to give credit to the former Prime Minister, was already in the works.
Well, I think the proof will be in the pudding, and we're already seeing a lot of positive investment signals. We're seeing encouraging words from people who are saying things like, this is probably the best time to invest in Canada they've seen in a while. We've seen that we're second in the G7 in terms of growth. Ultimately, we're creating jobs, we're creating economic activity, we're diversifying trade. These things are working. There's a lot more work to do to make sure those benefits are felt broadly by Canadians, but it's happening.
We're going to leave it on that note. Thank you so much, Mr. Hogan. I appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
That's Liberal MP and Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Natural Resources, Cory Hogan. We've got more coming up as we look ahead to Pierre Poilievre's speech and the big leadership vote he will face tonight in Calgary. A special edition of The Front Bench, sitting right next to me, Sebastian Skamsky, Sharon Carr, and Kim Wright will join me next after a quick commercial break. Stay right there.
Okay.
Welcome back to Power Play. I'm Vashi Capellos, live on this Friday from Calgary. We are inside the convention center where the Conservative convention is taking place. There are a variety of policies, if we can switch now to a live feed of what's happening just behind me, a variety of policies that are being debated in the lead up to the big event tonight, which is an address from the leader of the party, Pierre Poilievre, to the members of the party. Thousands of them will fill this room for a couple of hours from now. And then he will face a leadership vote that will take place over a couple hours late into the evening. And we expect results perhaps sometime overnight local time. Here to unpack what we collectively can expect from both that speech and the vote, I'm joined by a special edition of The Front Bench, all here on set with me. Next to me, Sebastian Skamsky, who's former Director of Media Relations to Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre. Sharon Carr is a CTV News political analyst, former Deputy Chief of Staff as well to former Finance Minister Bill Morneau. And Kim Wright rounds us out this evening. She's a longtime NDP strategist and founder and principal of Wright Strategies. Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Happy Friday. Happy Convergence on Calgary Day. Sebastian, I've got to start with you because I imagine you've been behind the scenes while these speeches are being written and crafted and, preparing for big moments like not necessarily this vote, but tonight it will be this vote. Take us behind the scenes, if you could, about what you anticipate the prep for what's happening tonight. What's the objective? What's the prep like?
Yeah, I think obviously these speeches, these types of events, these conventions are a moment for the leader to be able to chart out his message, his course for the next few months and years leading us into the next election. And so I think Mr. Poilievre, when he's thinking about what he'll be saying in a few hours, I think he's putting together his thoughts on how is he channeling his priorities to the Canadian people, and really what is it that he can offer the Canadian people in that speech. I think we're probably going to hear a lot in contrast to what Prime Minister Carney has been doing of late about the domestic issues facing Canadians, about the issues around affordability, cost of living, really being able to make ends meet. And I think he's going to deliver a message of hope, a message of unity for our country that is so badly divided right now, including even in Alberta. Usually we talk about this in the context of Quebec, but in Alberta as well. And so I think those are the themes we're going to be looking at. I'm very excited for him to rally the delegates behind us. The room is going to be packed, and I know they'll be keen to hear from him before they cast their ballots.
Let me ask you a question about kind of from a strategic perspective and a speech like this, which we know all leaders of all parties give. At a moment like this, where we're anticipating there could be an election this year, we've got a minority government, but just on the cusp of a majority, like how much of the speech, Sharon, in your view, is about the room versus the potential audience on TV?
Well, it has to meet a balance of both, right? I think if Pierre Poilievre is going to lean into what he's used to leaning into, it's going to be about the room. But what I would hope for the sake of everyone in the country is that he actually turns into speaking to Canadians. There's media from across the country here today, and Canadians will be watching. So whether or not he can actually pivot, that is a question. He tends to have the tendency to focus on his base, and his base is out there too in the public, are Canadians. But whether or not he can tailor that to bring people in, politics is a game of addition, and he has done so, but he has also alienated a large chunk of Canadians. So let's see if he can find a balance and use a tone and tenor that works.
Does the fact that he will, right after the speech, face a leadership vote, Kim, impart any direction on that balance? Like, I mean, if this were a regular convention where you're not staring down the barrel of an election plus an hour from now, or an hour from the speech, a leadership vote, like, does that shift the balance of how much more you have to talk to the room?
Yeah, there is a bit of that, but what we're also seeing is there has to be a bit of contrition, right? He didn't win on election night. He put them through a by-election. Where is he going to run? What's the plan going forward? So there will absolutely be red meat for the base, but there also has to be a bit of, okay, yep, didn't get where we all thought we were getting to when every Conservative in this room was measuring the drapes. But where do we go from here and how do we move forward? I would also like to believe he's going to announce where he's going to run, but that's a whole other challenge for him because he's already said he's not going to run in his currently occupied seat. So there is a tone and tenor for the room. but there is also so much through social media, through chat groups, of conversations that are happening, and conversations I've been hearing for the last 2 days here at the convention, that he needs to make sure that people understand where he's going, but also it can't be the same old, same old.
So I'm going to make a bet here, and you'd know better than me, but I've interviewed I don't know how many conservatives since the election. Contrition is not the name of the game after this election. The message is very firmly, and I'm being fair based on what I've heard, Seb, from all of these MPs the message is like, we almost got there. If not for extenuating circumstances, we would have. Do you anticipate anything different? And I also wonder what you think about, my assumption was that the room felt very similar to MPs in that they didn't need to because they had gotten to such new heights. But I'm surprised by the number of delegates who are talking to our reporters saying, like, yeah, we had a great success, but we didn't win. Like, they are looking for some explanation. Maybe not contrition, but explanation.
Yeah, listen, we're all yearning to have the reins of power. Obviously, that's the name of the game. That's why we're a political party that's seeking to elect the Liberals who have been in there for far too long. So, yeah, did we want to have one? Obviously, certainly. That unfortunately didn't happen. The circumstances of that were so incredibly kind of out of left field. And of course, there's lessons to be learned for us as a party, as a movement, to understand how we shift that, how we reflect what we say to voters and certain demographic groups that maybe need to hear our message in a different way. Totally. But I think the message that Mr. Poilievre is delivering tonight is one that is going to be unifying. It's one that is going to be a broad message of hope to Canadians that they could all identify with, because they're all really struggling after a decade of Liberal government.
So what Mr. Scheer told me was that the speech would kind of be dual in focus, to Seb's point, Sharon. And he initially said it's going to be a lot of like what the Prime Minister has not accomplished. And then there would be a message of hope and unity. Do you think they can square those circles? And again, I'll point to something that surprised me. And I did this with Mr. Scheer as well. The number of delegates who are actually looking for them to delineate between, like, not approach in the same way, this Prime Minister versus the last one. Like, I was surprised at the number of people here who like mentioned that in their conversations or clips with us.
Well, it's been quite clear. Former Prime Minister Trudeau has lived rent-free in Pierre Poilievre's head for a long time. We still, I think, Mr. Scheer was up here, had mentioned carbon tax multiple times. It's just a matter of whether he can pivot. He has had moments where he can pivot, and we've seen him do that, but he's also had moments where he hasn't been able to because it is his default. His default has to go back to Justin Trudeau and paint Carney and Trudeau at the same with the same pen. Now, whether or not he can do that, I'm super interested to see that. And whether this speech is going to be about unity, we know he has the ability to do so, but he just tends to default back and back into the divisiveness. And I do think it'll be a truly big mistake if he does that tonight. A great gift for the Liberals, and we'll take it. But whether or not he can do that, I think is to be determined.
On the subject of unity, I also asked Mr. Scheer, and I'm interested in your perspective, Kim, about separatism and the stories over the past few days, right? And I want to again delineate between like a sentiment that underpins, you know, people feeling disenfranchised in this province and overlooked by the federal government, and people who are meeting with Trump officials to try and break the country apart. Mr. Scheer was pretty clear in denouncing the latter, but didn't really give me too much of a perspective on whether or not it will be specifically addressed in the remarks tonight. Do you think the issue has to be addressed by Mr. Poilievre tonight?
I think it absolutely has to be. I mean, we're here in Calgary. There's been some counter conventioning from those who have been part of a separatist coalition. He has got to very clearly say where he stands. I mean, we looked earlier this week, Naheed Nenshi, the NDP leader here in Alberta, asked all MLAs to say, where do you stand on Canada? Are you with Canada or not? I think there's a legitimate question to be asked if the leader of His Majesty's Loyal Opposition is with Canada or not, and how does that play out in the policies and framing in which he's going to do this? That is a legitimate question amongst all the others. We talk about unity. I mean, I've heard so much about unity. I think Seb has mentioned it at least twice now in this interview. How does that actually unfold? What does a united Canada look like? Because Mr. Poilievre's challenge, and we saw this during the campaign and since, unity is not really a strong point. Divisiveness certainly is. And that becomes a challenge of how do you go from the opposition to where he wants to be? And does this crowd, does this group come along for the ride with him? It's one thing to wear the buttons. It's a very different thing to get there.
I've got like 20 seconds for each of you. I want to give you a chance to respond to that.
Well, no surprise, I see things very differently. I think Canadians are united in their suffering after the last decade, frankly, and I think a lot of us here who have the privilege of being here don't fully see the way that job losses have affected Canadians, the way that food bank lines have grown, the way people can't afford to live, literally. And so that's who Mr. Poilievre will be championing, and I think that's who's going to be listening broadly.
What's the number? What do you think the number is going to be?
Listen, I think in order for him to walk away from this with a resounding victory, it has to be over 80%. And you know what? I'll even go as far as saying it has to be over 87%.
Wow.
And I'm putting it
That's
out there.
Setting expectations
Yes,
high.
setting it high.
Kim?
Good job.
Look, they should be, considering how they've ran this convention, very, very high. I've heard the number of the Stephen Harper 84%. That seems to be the benchmark I'm hearing from a lot of people. Whether or not those buttons will vote, I don't know. For viewers at home, many delegates are wearing yes for Pierre buttons. We also saw a lot of that in Ontario with Bonnie Crombie. All of her delegations were wearing those buttons, so who knows?
I'm going to save your prediction for our special coverage, which gets underway in a few hours. Thanks, guys. Sebastian Skamsky, Sharon Carr, and Kim Wright. All three of them will join us for that special coverage just in advance of Pierre Poilievre's remarks to the crowd here. I'll take a quick commercial break. Former Conservative Cabinet Minister John Baird is my guest after that break. Welcome back to our special coverage of the Conservative Convention here in Calgary. We're looking ahead to the leader of the party, Pierre Poilievre's speech, and then leadership vote a little bit later on this evening. And I am joined right now by former Conservative Cabinet Minister John Baird. Mr. Baird, it's good to see you again.
Great to be with you, Effie.
Thank you very much for making the time. In your mind, what does Pierre Poilievre in this speech tonight need to do?
I think he needs to set out a direction for the party going forward, where we want to position ourselves and how we can best win the next election. I think we can, I don't want to raise the stakes for Pierre, but he's a great speaker, and I'm looking forward to his speech, as are all the delegates.
So when you reflect on the direction that you think the party does need to go in, now that you've seen, almost a year or 8 months of what this version of the government looks like, how would you, what's your advice to chart that path? Like, what would you want to hear about what that path looks like?
Well, I think Pierre led a conservative party in the last election with a conservative platform, not a liberal light. And I think that's how we win elections, when we're genuine and true to our values. I think we can talk about, how we package and polish things, how we campaign. But I thought we came forward the last election with a great platform. I think we had a focus on urban Canada and Ontario, especially those valuable suburban ridings around the city of Toronto, and women voters. And I'm excited about the speech tonight and excited about the coming months.
Is there any kind of policy augmentation or reflection even that has to occur given the amount in the last 6 months that we've seen of policies that a few years ago I would have originally anticipated only hearing from the Conservative Party and are now being put forward by a Liberal government? I know they're not perfectly the same, but they're similar, right?
I think it makes Pierre probably the most successful opposition leader in Canadian history, because time and time again, the Liberals are adopting his policy platform, something that 6 months ago they would have found abhorrent, whether it was the carbon tax, whether it was dealing with the inflation and groceries. Pierre is consistently speaking to middle-class voters, consistently speaking to the challenges affecting average Canadian families. And I think in many respects, the last election all became about Mark Carney once Justin Trudeau left, and all became about Donald Trump. The messages that Pierre was delivering in the last election are still the meat and potatoes issues affecting Canadian families around their kitchen tables. And I think they'll fall on a pretty sympathetic audience of Canadians who are still struggling as much as they were 6 months ago, if not more.
Very much so. But I guess I wonder, like, does it, when you were campaigning in the last election, there wasn't any sort of record of similarity with the Trudeau government, right? It was easy to paint a contrast. It was easy to see those are two different options. Now that there is evidence, and I take the point of frustration among Conservatives who are like, God, this is the stuff we've been saying forever, and now, now it's being adopted. But ultimately, like, does that mean that you have to navigate things any differently? And I'll point to something I mentioned to Mr. Scheer earlier in the show. Like, I'm surprised by the number of delegates who have approached me to say, hey, it's a tough time for Canada. We would like to see a little less opposing, a little more working together, that kind of thing. Like, how do you square that circle?
Yeah, it's tough. Pierre was able to prosecute the case against Justin Trudeau to Canadians, able to prosecute the case on the carbon tax to Canadians, and I think he's got to be able to prosecute the case of a better economic policy. Our GDP per capita economic growth in the last 10 years is up 0.5%. versus the United States, 20%. We're last among all the major countries. Pierre's got to talk about common sense, competent macroeconomic policy. I think that's what he's been doing since the election, and I think I'd like to see more of it.
And do you think, when you mention some of the groups, for example, that you need to focus more in on when you look at some of the GTA ridings or female voters? Do you think, and I'll put to you some of the polling that we've seen, when you said the last election was about Mark Carney, his polling far outstrips his party's. The Conservative parties right now far outstrips Mr. Poilievre's. Does there need to be any kind of change there?
Well, you see, polls can change very quickly in Canadian elections.
As they did in the last one, yeah.
Election campaigns matter, and if the government becomes too complacent and too cocky, that'll probably be a big help for Pierre. Listen, the last election, the Conservative Party got the highest popular vote, the third highest popular vote that we have since the 1950s. We won ridings like 3 out of 3 in Windsor, Ontario. We won Timmins, Ontario. We won seats in Vancouver Island that even Stephen Harper couldn't win. We did an extraordinary good job. It wasn't enough. We've got to up our game. We've got to be better prepared. We've got to have our candidates nominated a lot faster. And I think, you look at Stephen Harper. He learned a lot from his first election defeat and came back stronger and with a better group of candidates to form a government. And I think that's what you'll see with Pierre.
When he faced a leadership vote in 2005, Mr. Harper secured, I think it was 84% Does Mr. Poilievre need to retain a similar level of support?
I'm not going to get into the numbers game.
I have to try.
This is not a game show, but I feel Pierre will do very well tonight.
Okay, I'll leave it on that note. Mr. Baird, a pleasure. Appreciate your
to
time. Thank you. Former Conservative Cabinet Minister John Baird. We've got more coverage coming up after a short break live here from Calgary on Power Play.
I think Poilievre's solid. People got the wrong impression on Poilievre. He was up against a different prime minister for 10 years who was doing a horribly bad job. And all Poilievre could do was stand up and criticize constantly. So everybody thinks that's all he can do, because for 10 years, that's all he could do. So with Carney, he's a different animal altogether. So Poilievre will change his approach now. I think you'll see a much more likable individual.
It was a success, but it wasn't a win. Still, when you go behind that curtain, it's still your private franchise, and you decide as you will at that time. So that's why I came to the convention to get a sense of what's happening.
So your mind isn't made up yet?
Not totally yet.
A little flavor there from some of the delegates who are attending the Conservative convention here in Calgary. That convention is in full swing. Some of the policies you can see behind me being debated by members. But the main event, the big event, occurs a couple of hours from now. And that's when our special coverage will get underway as well. At 6 o'clock Mountain, 8 o'clock Eastern, we're going to do a little pre-speech analysis with some of your favorite pundits. We'll also hear from the campaign manager for the Conservatives. And then we will carry Pierre Poilievre's speech live right here on CTV News Channel, and we'll have analysis after the speech as well. The whole thing doesn't finish there, because after that speech, Mr. Poilievre will face his membership. They will have the opportunity to cast a ballot on his leadership, which is part of the constitution of the party. If you lose an election, you got to face your leadership. The last time that happened with Stephen Harper, he was able to secure more than 84% of the vote. What will the number be for Mr. Poilievre? You're going to have to tune in a few hours from now. I'm going to leave Power Play there, but I will see you 2 hours from now. Have a wonderful rest of your evening, and see you then.